bid goodbye to 2021 and welcome 2022. This week we are celebrating it as very light and very interesting sessions, one on storytelling and second with music. Today we have with us Sri Ajit Kamath. I welcome you all, Mr. Ajit Kamath, the past presidents who have joined, Indrapal ji, our EC members, senior members like Pramod Bhai, and all others who are there today with us for this storytelling session. Storytelling is always a very mesmerizing experience that we had since our childhood. When someone talks about story, we remember our grandparents, parents who had given us lessons through stories. And why not? The cases which we solve in business schools are also stories which we try and understand and analyze. Lessons, learnings, and many things that come through storytelling. And it's an art that is very prominent nowadays in business schools, which takes care of storytelling. We have with us today Ajit Kamath, who is not new to Bombay Management Association. We keep inviting him as the topic is so interesting. Ajit is a professional facilitator and a trainer. He is in the profession of facilitation, training, speaking since last 28 years out of his choice. He is a qualified lawyer and comes from a business family. He has worked in consulate, British Council, and yet preferred to transit in the field of training as he believes that he can make a difference. He is passionate about the subject of public speaking, presentation skills, drama, storytelling, and he uses various drama and theater concepts like improv, forum, theater, role plays, etc. in his training deliveries too. He led his first open program, The Fascinating World of Public Speaking, in 1996, and therefore apply the consultancy firm he heads is known as Wiz Talks. Wiz means experts and Talks means the speakers. He is involved with various organizations on long-term application-based training projects. Some of the clients he has worked with are Philips, ICICI Securities, Cintrix, Ford, Magna, National Stock Exchange, Unilever, Morgan Stanley, and many more. He loves to do large format training sessions and has presented at various forums such as IIF Asia and India, NHRD, CAI, ISTD, and Trainers Forum. He is mentoring a few new trainers to better their training competencies. Ajit was one of the founders of International Association of Facilitators, the Speakers Club, and the Applied Improv Network in India. He has an interest in photography, JJ School of Applied Arts alumnus, humor, past president of Humor Club Mumbai, and has acted in movies and in television serials. Ajit has written articles in prestigious newspapers such as Times of India, Midday, in magazine, and one of his scripted comedy play is performed regularly in amateur theatre circuit. A multifaceted personality, Ajit is presently a visiting faculty with TISS for their OD program, teaching facilitation skills to OD and learning and development and HR leaders. He used to also teach at Wellington Institute of Management, SP Jain Institute of Management Studies, and other business schools. The past 8 years have seen Ajit actively pursuing his interest in group process facilitation and has delivered interesting facilitation projects. Ajit, in August 2014, has accredited by International Association of Facilitators at CPF, and he has also done his coaching certification through Coaching Lighthouse. As I said, that Ajit is not new to Bombay Management Association. Today, we thought that as we are ending 2021, and with all the hardships that we have had for last few months, I think some light moments are required. And these light moments will give us energy and rejuvenate the level of motivation and inspiration through these storytelling. So first, thank you, Ajit, for accepting our invitation once again to be on the forum of Bombay Management Association, and telling us some stories and the philosophy behind these stories. Maybe once again we will revive. Thank you so much, and over to you.
Thank you, Kavita, for those wonderful words. And while you are introducing so many things and so many stories emerged for me about the various things and jugards I have done in life, from a business family, being part of a business family, to moving into learning law. And while I was learning law, also I did my photography from JJ Applied Arts. I had completely forgotten. It's been so long that I have not talked about it. And there were some amazing stories. Maybe some other time I could talk about how these transitions. And then I was working at the British Council division as a cultural activities officer too.
I
But
think that
one
makes you interesting. You have stories from all over the facets of life.
and there are so many things I would have done, undone in my years that I have experienced. I think I need to give credit to my dad for this. He, in spite of being third standard passed only, with all us three siblings, our kids, he gave us opportunity to do what we wanted. And I think that says a lot for someone who himself was not highly educated. Neither my mom was highly educated, and that was the magical thing. Whatever I said I want to learn, so I wanted to learn law, and he said, go ahead, learn. I said I wanted to do photography. He didn't even say, why photography, what's the connection. He said, go ahead and learn whatever you want, learn. And while I was also helping him out in his business. But one story that I remind, and there's a connect with BMA here, my second salary. So I was in business, no doubt, but when I joined the British Council, it became my first job technically. Before that, I was an entrepreneur. I was doing my things and all that, and I joined British Council. My second salary, first salary, as duly goes to my parents, as in mom. The second salary, what I did was I had a wonderful friend of a lawyer, and he still has amazing practice in Mumbai with 50 odd lawyers with him. One of the things that he told me is, Ajit, 10% of your income, whatever you earn, should go one in, books, studying yourself, in the sense, enhancing yourself, upgrading yourself, upskilling yourself. And he said the other 10% invest in attire that helps your profession. And I have done that. So one of the first 10% things which came out of my second salary is I became a life member of BMA. Uh, I became a life member of two other associations, in spite of the fact that I was quite young. And typically, people said BMA, you join only after a particular number of years of experience and all that. I said, fine, I will gain that experience. So I have been a life member for ages in BMA. Not very active. I've come for some annual general meetings, been there at times, but overall, it's been something which I have been looking at the various activities. I also ran a training program in BMA at a point of time, so there's a connect. So BMA and my connect is also strong. I loved the view outside, and my college was government law college, so you understand how what do you say, very close was BMA offices, as and when we wanted to come and sit there, meet someone or do a course. So here I am, and this is probably the third session I'm running for BMA. One was for another module, and we ran something similarly in the virtual space. So it's been a very interesting journey. I just want to let the group know that for many, pandemic has been the virtual space. But I was in the virtual space about 8 years back, when one of the UK-based training companies for high potential training, high potential global identified individuals, we used to run workshops on virtual. And at that point of time, it was WebEx training, which was an enterprise solution where we used to run it. So virtual is not new. Virtual is something which works, and it has been working very well. But the second session, second story that I see here is we have about 41 participants, and that's amazing. But from a perspective of faces, I just see 5 faces. And I was just wondering, it's like when I was doing law, they said insaf ka tarazu. And one of the things that happened with the insaf ka tarazu was it had these black putty on the eyes, and it looked so dark. So inviting some more people to have their faces on. Remember, for a storyteller or for anyone, having an audience which is smiling, reflecting, doing some bits of action. Thank you, Roshni. Thank you, Arun, with your iPhone also. I know now you have iPhone, Arun. Arun is a good friend, so I can pull his leg. Ashish, welcome. You were on camera and then I lost you. I said, hey, gaya kahan, yaar? And now that's there. Wonderful. So if you can keep it on, great, because that will be amazing. Hi, Seema, long time. Arza, Vandana, welcome. So please have the courage to have your cameras on. I know you could be in places where it's uncomfortable, so then fine. But those who can have, we can connect, we can remember. You'll remember me because I have this wonderful opportunity to be seen. But when you are also seen, it gives me a wonderful connect with so many people I would have met at different points of time, in different places, in different forums, and that just gives a life. Hi, Sureka. Welcome. So inviting the rest. So we have now about 15 people who are on camera and 16 now. Lloyd, welcome, Lloyd, long time. Just hoping the other remaining 30 people buy on and on, jump in and have their cameras on. We'll try to have a bit of interactions. I know this storytelling is has many components. One is we can, like we do it in a corporate workshop, we can make it highly interactive and all action based. But looking at the 1.5 hours that I have, the way I have designed is I am going to put in some bits of concepts or understanding, and then we could still, if time permits, have some bit of at least one set of interaction in breakout rooms. So be prepared for that. And if you're not having your cameras on at this point of time, which is your choice, when the breakout rooms happen, and I'll introduce those at that point of time, please choose to have your cameras on and connect with people with stories, right? So here we go. Let me share some bits. I think Kavita has already done an amazing job about talking about me, but just to tell you that WizTalks is the organization, and as she said, Wiz means experts and talks means speakers, and there lies a story there. Many years back, or let me put it this way, many people tell me that, hey, Ajit, you have been training, you have been doing, you've been for this, probably you're a born speaker. And I laugh because I still remember my first time I stood in front of an audience. I was in college. I was in Xavier's High School in near Metro, and then moved to Vadala. And then I joined a college there, SIWS. And so when I joined that college, what happened was I was made in charge. The teacher saw some kind of this. There was a management association, commerce management association. I was made the class representative. Now I came from a boys' school. Xavier's High School is a boys' school, and here I was in a co-ed forum. So my teacher called me out. She had done a meeting, explained to us about what is commerce association and commerce management association, and I was supposed to stand up in front of 120 students. You know how commerce colleges are in Mumbai, huge and big. And she called me up. So all of me, who was a little more shorter, fourth bench, I walked up, I turned, and when I looked at the audience, 120, and remember, I come from all boys schools with nice good looking girls on the right hand side, and one of these girls on sixth row, she smiled and asked all of 16 years old child or kid, what happens when a cute looking girl smiles at you. I forgot what I was supposed to speak. I had prepared myself very well. I had said, I forgot my name. So I just stood there and became blank, absolutely blank. I don't know how many of you have heard this, but this is what happened when I was in SIWS. And this teacher was an amazing person, great teacher. She realized that something was wrong. She came up, she put her hand on my shoulder and said, Ajit. I said, yeah, Ajit. That's how I know. She said, Commerce Association. I became a parrot, and she said something, and I just, went and said what she said. Believe me, I didn't remember what I said. Um, That was the most frightful experience. I used to sit on third or fourth row, and I had no friends in this college because I had moved from town to suburbs. I sat on the last row, which was probably the 16th, 17th row behind. My bag was still on fourth, fifth row. All the lectures ended, the break ended, and when everyone had left, I went, picked up my bag. And here I was thinking, that I am going to leave this college. This college is bad, suburbs is bad. I was in town, that's a better place, there's more safer, psychological safety and all that. I said, these people are like that. I should have never joined. I should have joined Xavier's or a, typical mindset that goes. I walked out of the room. It was, I think, third floor in the college, and you had to walk down. And someone joined me, which I didn't realize. Around second floor, I realized that someone was walking with me. And I turned and looked and suddenly realized that it was my professor. And when I realized, I said, ma'am, sorry, I didn't see you. She said, no problem. You were deep in your thoughts. So I said, ma'am, I didn't know what to say. She looked at me in the eye and said, Ajit, you have two choices. You have two choices. I looked up and she said, one choice is you keep running away from it. You keep running away from it. And second choice is you do something about it. If you intend to do something about this fear that you have, I am willing to help you. I'm willing to support you. And all of me, with that fear and insult or whatever was going on in my head, I picked up the second choice. And thank you to that teacher. She really helped me in her own way, to the extent of when I started doing training and all that. We co-facilitated a program. And I used to call her ma'am, and she said, "No calling me ma'am. I am, Kamal." And that's the most amazing journey that I had in the space of being someone who could never stand and speak, to having addressed in Shanmukan and all before the fire burnt it, and then it was revived, about 4,800 people. And I did sessions for Stephen Covey's organization where people probably paid, in those days, 10 years back, 30K for a session of 3 days. And I just feel proud to say that every one of us has the ability to stand up and speak. Every one of us has the ability to, you know, have a story while we speak. And for me, this story is important because I have always believed that if you're speaking, if you're connecting, if you're communicating, if you're reaching out to people, stories are life, and life is stories. So with this, let me start my session. I just wanted to add a story that I have gone through, and it's been something which has been, some of my friends here, probably Arun knows it. Some of the other friends who know me very well have heard it before. So let's now move to your side, and I have a quick check-in. So what is a check-in? You go to flights. Hopefully, I have not traveled from the past 2.5 years, so I've not seen the airport at all. But those who have traveled recently, you know that when you enter, you have to check in, right? So we'll do a check-in. This is a virtual check-in. I have a question for you. I am looking at the chat box, right? So we are not looking at people unmuting and speaking, but we are looking at interactions in the chat box at this point of time. And then we can invite some people to share. So the question that I have here is, which has been, or which is your favorite story? Which has been your favorite story? We just require, if there's a name around that story, then please type it, the name. If it is a story which probably we don't know of, try to put it into a name and put it up to us. So we have another 30 seconds, and I'm going to do a countdown. You can start typing, and I'll tell you when. I can see Anjana say hi, Anjana. Twinkles with God. Wow. Vrigu and Narayan. Looking at my stopwatch, another 15 seconds to go. Okay, for those who are still, typing, don't worry about the spellings. That's not important. You just have to type, even if it's in your own way. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so let's see some of the names that are, and you can go in the chat box and see it. If you can't see it, just press in the Zoom window chat on the right hand side, your chat box will open. I'm sure we know about it, but we have some interesting ones here. Vrigu and Narayan by Indranil, Ruta is grandmother and a pumpkin. Sureka is hair and the favorite, right? You can never miss that out. And there's so many versions of it, Sureka or not that. Then we have MI A2, which is Bihar story. I would invite people to change your names. It's a simple thing how you change. You go to your name where on the right hand side in the participant, you press more and you can rename yourself. Zoom allows you to rename yourself to what your actual name is. Anuradha says Cinderella. Then Chandamama. Chandamama, Jagmohan, hi. Chandamama is probably a library of stories, right? But which one did you love in Chandamama? Was it something regular or this? I
Vikram or
really
Vetal.
Vikram or Vital. I really cried when Chandamama closed down, and it was like it was so sad. My dad used to also read it till about 15, 20 years back on a regular basis every month. The Crow and the Stone, favorite mine, Hussein. Then you have Alchemist, okay, Lion, Family Album, Hare and Tortoise, Mahabharata, and Rapunzel. Then we have Jonathan. That's Ketna. That's another favorite of mine. Jonathan Livingston Seagull, and inviting people, if you have not read this book, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, please go and read it. It's amazing book. It's amazing book on excellence. Then we have Cinderella. Vikram or Betal is Jagman has answered that. Lloyd is Starfish Story. Oh, that's a beautiful one. Starfish. Supandi. Oh, Supandi. I forgot to tell you. Probably it should be there in my introduction that I said. I have done some story time with Uncle Pai, and if you know who is Uncle Pai, Amar Chitrakatha. Anand Pai, he's no more, late Uncle Pai, and he came up with audio cassettes. It didn't do well, so probably it was shelved then. But we read stories. So I was Supandi in three of the stories. I picked up the Supandi character. I was also playing a tiger and a lion with my voice. It was audio cassettes, not a video cassette. And I remember the amazing time I had listening to those stories that he used to remember on the fly, and that was a magical experience of being with him and doing this story time. So probably I have those cassettes which says these are the audio cassettes, and it come with complete set of Supandi and all that, which the new owners, I hope they're monetizing it and bringing it back. I'm not sure. I'm just going to ask the simple story that I see here. Lloyd, do you want to unmute and tell us about the starfish story? Let me just stop share, give you a little nice spotlight if you want to explain in your own way.
Sure. Am I audible, Ajit?
You are.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. So the story goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a young child who was walking near a seashore, and while he was walking, he saw certain things lying on the sand. And there's another old gentleman who's coming from the opposite side. And the old gentleman was looking at what this boy is doing. The boy, what he was doing is he was picking up something from the sand and throwing it back into the sea. And he was doing this all the way long. I mean, the gentleman came very close to the boy and asked the boy, "Hey, what are you doing?" And the boy is very engrossed in what he's doing, so he doesn't really pay attention. And the gentleman asks again, "Excuse me, I'm talking to you. What are you doing?" And the boy looks up and says, "I'm throwing starfishes back into the sea." And the gentleman, again, he looks at the boy and says, "Hey, looks like you're mad. Don't you know there are so many starfishes that are lying all around the beach? And what is it that you're trying to achieve? What difference does it make?" And the boy, calmly looks up to the man, and he silently says, he throws a starfish back into the sea, and he says, "You know what? It made a difference to that one." So that's when the gentleman realizes that I was so single-minded, or I was so narrow-minded that I could not look at life through the lens of what the young boy was trying to do. And then he eventually joins the boy, and both of them try and save as many starfishes as they possibly can. So that's the story that I had, Ajit.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's give a nice hand. If because we can't unmute and all that, you can also give a hand like this. Virtual handshake is like that. Thank you for that, Lloyd. It's been one of my favorite stories, but I just realized that I have not narrated it for a longish period of time. So thank you for reviving that story. I think some of these stories are magical. It changes us when we say it too, right? Every time I used to narrate this story, I would think about what is the difference that I am creating to that one person who is in front of me. And I still remember we coined something for IF at a point of time called MAD, MAD, the first conference we held for International Association of Facilitators. It meant make a difference. Make a difference. We are mad. Make a difference. And it was a starfish story that ignited the whole concept of calling the conference Mad Conference. I still remember that. Thank you for that. So let me go ahead and talk about what is it that I am going to cover today. So let me show you a different way agenda. So this is my annotation chart. I hope you can see that. I'm going to. So here we are, and you may say, Ajit, we have already spent so much time, but that's fine. We had planned it this way. This is what we are going to cover. So the first thing that I'm going to get into, which is a short, more insights on what is the impact of stories. Talking about, we all know this, but maybe reinforcing this bit about why stories really work, and why stories are being used in business. I think ages back it was used, but somewhere or the other, the colonization brought in the conceptualization of things and putting it into statistics and numbers and figures and charts, and we went berserk on that. And what we forgot was those charts or data points don't communicate on its own. What really communicates is the stories behind those charts. So we are going to look at impact of stories, why stories work. Then we are going to look at some story imperatives, where then I'll introduce something which is a favorite tool of mine, which is called Fossil, and I'm calling it Potli. Potli is a bag or a basket of stories that you need to harvest in your organizations if you want to use, because I'm keeping the context here of all of organizations, where we can use it for business, right? We'll get into a story crafting framework. How do you craft your stories? And then we'll talk about the teller as in the narrator, the storyteller, and the importance and some bits around it. This is what we are going to cover in the remaining 1 hour or so that we have. And we'll, as I said, we'll attempt to have some bits of conversations around it. So let me move forward. Let me talk about impact of stories. I'm going to speed this bit up because this is more of data and something which comes from some bit of research that we have been seeing. So just giving you a little insight of why stories work, from the perspective of business storytelling. Personal life, we know it worked because our grandparents, and my grandfather was an amazing storyteller. Whenever we used to go to native place, he used to, and the most magical thing that my grandfather would do is he used to be the pan, the regular pan, not what you get ready made. They used to make the pan betel leaf, and then he used to put some supari and all that, and he used to cut it on his own and all that. And with every cut, he had that magic. He would say something, the story is on, and then he would pause, and he used to open, and remove his pan ka dibba and all that. And we as kids used to get so angry and irritated, and there were no lights in those days, so it was all candlelight. Half of the time current used to be not there in the village. And then I thought he planned those pauses. He planned it because he would have all the betel nuts already crushed, but he would not use that. He would, while telling us a story, and especially was telling us a ghost story, the sway of the leaves around when he cut the betel nut was magical. I mean, we couldn't sleep in the night. That's a different story, but that's how we narrated. So somewhere or the other, I think personal storytelling was always there. I think now we have lost it with all of us, including me, and I see my father being so busy, we don't spend time with our grandchildren. So I think those things have got lost. We need to revive that, but that's something aside. So let me move forward and talk about the impact of stories from a perspective of why in organizations do we want to use it so much and why it works. If you Google, and Google Deva is always there, you type it, you'll get a loads of information. But just to give you some perspectives of what I have gathered, how it impacts, why stories will work in business, why can CEOs, management, managers, leaders need to use stories. In fact, the largest number of workshops that I've been running for last 5 years on storytelling, you'll be surprised, has been more for multinational companies, and I wonder why. And the moment you talk to a head HR or L&D head here, they think storytelling sabko aata hai. And believe me, sometimes when we coach people on public speaking, if these guys knew storytelling, some of their press conferences, town halls would have been so magical. Sometimes here I'm reminded of Stephen Covey. He says, common sense isn't common anymore. So when people believe they know, probably that's what they don't know. And when you accept that, okay, this is something that you can learn, I think it's amazing. So let me give you some impact. Before I get into impact, I'll show you this video of, you know who it is, Dr. William Gates, also known as, or Bill Gates, whose actual name is Dr. William Gates. And the reason I'm showing you this video is to talk about when he was getting his doctorate in Harvard, in a very formal speech, how he brings storytelling, right? And how it connects to the audience. And when I go to many forums and management forums, as well as invited, I sometimes find principals missing this, leaders missing this, and invited guests get very conceptual with kids. But a person like him who comes from IT field where data is, king, they still believe in the power of storytelling. And you'll be surprised he's not using a PowerPoint, which is his product, and he's narrating a story as a speaker. It's an old video, so some of you may have seen it. Let's look at it. Just give me a moment. Let me just set up one bit here so that you can see it well. Okay, here we are.
I've been waiting more than 30 years to say this. Dad, I always told you I'd come back and get my degree. I want to thank Harvard for this honor. I'll be changing my job next year, and it will be nice to finally have a college degree on my resume. I applaud the graduates for taking a much more direct route to your degrees. For my part, I'm just happy that the Crimson called me Harvard's most successful dropout. I guess that makes me valedictorian of my own special class. I did the best of everyone who failed. But I also want to be recognized as the guy who got Steve Ballmer to drop out of business school. I'm a bad influence. That's why I was invited to speak at your graduation. If I'd spoken at your orientation, fewer of you might be here today. Harvard was a phenomenal experience for me. Academic life was fascinating. I used to sit in on lots of classes that I hadn't even signed up for. And dorm life was terrific. I lived up at Radcliffe in Courier House. There were always a lot of people in my dorm room late at night discussing things because everyone knew that I didn't worry about getting up in the morning. That's how I came to be the leader of the antisocial group. We clung to each other as a way of validating our rejection of all those social people. Radcliffe was a great place to live. There were more women up there, and most of the guys were math science types. The combination offered me the best odds, if you know what I mean. That's where I learned the sad lesson that improving your odds doesn't guarantee success. One of my biggest memories of Harvard came in January 1975 when I made a call from Courier House to a company in Albuquerque, New Mexico that had begun making the world's first personal computer. I offered to sell them software. I worried they would realize I was just a student in a dorm and hang up on me. Instead, they said, "We're not quite ready. Come see us in a month," which was a good thing because we hadn't written the software yet. From that moment, I worked day and night on the extra credit project that marked the end of my college education and the beginning of a remarkable journey with Microsoft. What I remember above all,
I have kept a piece of it for you. Let me ask you this. What are the stories that he brings up in while he's getting a PhD in Harvard, and is doing the valedictory? What's the storytelling that he's using? Anyone wants to raise your hand? You can raise your hand in Zoom. If you go down, there's a reaction button. In reaction button, there's a raise hand, so we can have people. If you still want to unmute and speak, go ahead and do that. Welcome. Any insights, any things that comes up from this small piece that you saw, about 4 minutes that you saw, and how he's using stories? Anyone? Okay, I see Seema. Yeah, go ahead, Seema. I see your hand up.
Yeah, I think he used a lot of instances where a common person could relate to, that he being invited, not being invited at the time of the start of the year. I forgot the word.
Orientation. He
Orientation,
talks about
yeah.
orientation. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he being the head of introverts, and then so many things that people would come to him to talk to him because they knew that he need not worry about getting up in the morning. So many things that a common person could relate to, and all were very created light moments where people could relate to and have a laugh.
Even Jagmohan adds in the chat box that he's using humor. But if you see in the first part of humor, he talks about how he says, "Dad, I always said that I'll come back and get a degree," and he also talks about how people have been probably saying, is a college dropout, and all that. Or school dropout, which is what is used in US. And then he moves on. And by the way, it's a larger video, but go ahead and see that video. He later on talks about some important elements that helped him in Harvard, which helped Microsoft be what it is. But if you see even the video that I have shared, for those, I don't know how many of you have been in Harvard or have visited or studied there, but for those who haven't, what's the imaginary that came up for you when he was talking about his alma mater and Radcliffe? Radcliffe is one particular place within Harvard that he used to reside at. Anyone wants to share what came up for you when he talked about it, the second part of the video? Roshni, you want to try?
Because I think when he mentioned Radcliffe, everyone in the audience, they gave a hooray sort of a sound. So possibly because it is a very sophisticated place, I'm not too sure. Is it?
No, I will add to this. Actually, all the other colleges. So even in Cambridge, sorry, Oxford, I had gone for a conference. There are 21 or 26 colleges out there. Sorry, I may be not exactly in the numbers. It's not that, it's not like our colleges. It's a big place. So what I understand is probably what may have happened is Radcliffe is like, we used to have Tilak House and Yellow House and Red House. So all the people who are staying there now, the students from that started, hey, apna banda hai. That's and bingo. What you said was, so he connected with part of the audience with his story first, right? And then when he moves on to what happened in his part of where he stayed, I'm sure for anyone who's staying in the other parts of Harvard also would be similar experiences, right? And that's probably the ignition of storytelling. I have Dr. Parag Amin says he also speaks of how he approached his potential clients. Absolutely, Parag, thank you for that. And that was a very strong sharing of how, in fact, I see it as courage. walking up to a client and saying, I can develop a software for you when we are still in college and we have not even developed the software. And they said, hey, come and see us in a month. And we thanked the stars because we had not still developed the software. If you look at entrepreneurship journeys of many people, it starts with risk taking. And I think Bombay Management Association is all about management, leadership, and supporting that. So entrepreneurship many a times requires us to have the courage to approach people, say that this is what we do, this is what we do, and that can ignite a lot of thoughts for people. So I just wanted
Ajit,
to. Oh,
Jagmohan here.
Yep.
Yeah, he
Go ahead.
also connected with the audience, on the lighter side, that of how he stayed late and then he never got up early. So most of
Yeah.
the students connected with him or accordingly there.
I also kind of with diversity being so much talked about, I just kept quiet. I said someone may bring it up, but he talks about how he was the studious type, always studying and all that, and how it increased the odds when it comes to dating and all that. That's what the intent or thing was. So many stories within that 4 5 minutes that you see. Um, the reason I was showing you this video was to talk about storytelling. I think in India was always there, and probably it's there, but somewhere or the other in business, it got we became too westernized. And Western now is looking at storytelling, and there are more storytellers who actually only do storytelling and get paid. Much more than some of us trainers would get paid. But in India, where storytelling was grassroots, I would say it's there. It's so powerful. We have lost it. We have really lost it. It's something which we probably need to revive and make ourselves remember that, hey, storytelling was always with us. And somewhere or the other we lost it out. So my attempt is to share some wonderful ways of you can start storytelling in your environments. If nothing else, you can do it at home. That's the nice place to start, and not necessarily with kids. You can do it with adult populations too. And uh, at least at least 10 or 12 storytellers that I know across the globe and I connect with them don't do kid storytelling. Okay, they only do adult storytelling. When I say adult storytelling, it doesn't mean the word adult can be misrepresented. And no, they do stories for people like you and me. And there is a big group of people who also pay to attend storytelling, and they just narrate stories, and there's a debrief and there's understanding. In Pune, we have 3 associations, and I at times attend. And I have narrated 1 or 2 stories. I've not got time because I travel a lot, and they used to meet regularly on Saturdays before the pandemic. Now they do it virtually. So that's what it is there. I'm just saying, hey, we can really bring it to life by also bringing it into business storytelling. So now let's talk about business storytelling. Why do stories work? And I thought I'll give you some insights on that. I have collated this information. If you want, you can write it, pick it up, or take a screenshot. So why stories work: 22 times more likely to remember facts. When people listen to stories, as part of the story, they retain about 65% to 70% compared to only 5 to 10% of the information that's in a list. So it's a research by organization called Rocket Ship. Let me take you, just give me a moment. Let me just. Okay, when a person tells you an engaging story, the same part of your brain, so there was this research done and they put the nodes on the brain. And they found out that when someone tells an engaging story, the same part of your brain lights up as that of the person telling the story. Our brain makes very little distinction between what we experience personally and what we hear about others' experiences. So when we hear experiences, the same parts of the brains. In fact, I was reading a research which said that for students and young adults to accept dementia, old age dementia patients, they introduced in some colleges and youngsters storytelling. And when stories were narrated, their acceptance of their grandparents' dementia became much more easier and smoother. And that's one of the studies that throws out. So there's a lot of things that you can influence or work with stories. People are attracted to stories because we are social creatures and we relate to other people, and therefore that it's a kinesthetic connect which really brings and that's another bit I thought I can share. This one is very interesting. A story can go where quantitative analysis is denied admission. That's our hearts. With data points, you can speak to minds. It doesn't connect to hearts. It becomes difficult. But when we use stories, we can bring that connection to the hearts. Data can persuade people, but it doesn't inspire them to act. To do that, you need to wrap your vision in a story that fires the imagination and steals the store. Wonderful, right? So you see that there is a reason why. In fact, I've been coaching some leaders on public speaking and storytelling, because town halls in many organizations now are a norm. They address their whole population, and rather than stats and just data points and PPT driven charts, if you could narrate a story and connect with people on story, they find that people retain that information much more longer. There's also a very interesting thing which I was reading, and it came out that it brings focused attention from a statistical number or data point, or what is called as a statistical life, to what psychologists or economists call an identified life. And when I was reading this was very interesting. An economist says that a single identifiable victim, he calls it a victim because they're using stories also for creating influencing, influencing masses and all that. So a single identifiable person may affect many more minds than millions of anonymous victims. And therefore, if you see Schindler's List, or for that matter, if you look at stories of Mother Teresa, Mahatma Gandhi, and when we narrate it, what happens is there's so much of inner elements that we share, knowingly, unknowingly, to the listener, that it has the power to influence people. So stories are powerful. Unfortunately, today we see more brand builders. When I say branding, I'm saying the PR and brand, which sometimes stories are used as a manipulation rather than actually as an influence. So I'm saying, as a management, as a manager, as a leader, if we start using stories, genuine ones, if we start building it up, we could really, really create very powerful influences in organizations. So in short, just stats and data doesn't make people empathize with something that you want to say. Stories do. So inviting you to look at stories, and I have a question up for you, which says, okay, if storytelling is so important, what do you think are the most important imperatives of business storytelling? So again, inviting you to put it on the chat box, but this time we are doing chat waterfall. So what is a chat waterfall? You got a sense of it, but now I'm introducing it. So you type the answer, but don't press enter. Type the answer, don't press enter. Whatever your answer is, so 3 imperatives, you think 4 imperatives, 5 imperatives, 1 imperative, you type it, don't press enter. I'll do a countdown in 30 seconds, and I will say, 10, 9, and then we can have. So we'll have a complete list of unique points that come in, which are individual to you. Otherwise, what happens? Someone types and someone sees that typing and then ends up getting influenced and typing similar. So go ahead, type. So the question is, what are the important imperatives of business storytelling? All of you have so much of amazing experience in organizations, management, and hold on, don't send it. Just type it and keep it, type it and keep it. And I see 1 or 2 chats there, but it's earlier, so just hold on. And okay, I'm starting the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see what comes up. Okay, now this is called a waterfall. It's coming da 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 da, and what happens? It comes one go, but it gives us very, very independent opinions. Even if it's similar to someone else's, that's fine. So let's look at the imperatives that come up. I'm going up. You could also follow. And we would have Seema, I'll take your question a little later, or hold this question which you have written earlier a little later, and we can talk about it. So Pradeep says correlation with business situation. Nay, that was okay, his point. Okay, Indranil says provides clarity, shares experiences. Lloyd, making better decisions, connect with the employees, vision, mission, what's in it for me from the stakeholders' perspective. Voice modulation, humor, connect. Ruta, reliability, humor, expressions, voice modulation. Parag has sent a direct message to me. Parag, you could have copy paste it to everyone also. It says much better engagement of parties involved, emotional connect, effective communication, connecting with the audience, adding humor, making it relatable. Then we have better influence, stronger retentions, sharing facts and data, voice modulations. Beautiful. I think you have covered much more than I'm going to focus on, because what I'm going to focus on is more like umbrella words, and then all these things will merge into it, which is interesting. Arun says suspense and twist. Arun, I know you have amazing acting ability, and I can understand why suspense and twist. Kavita says empathy. Then Jagmohan says relevant, humor, results. Parag says, Parag has now put it up for all of you. Much better engagement of parties involved, emotional connect, effective communication. Ashish says, research, data, customer reviews, product ads, video, social. So imperatives of Ashish. Can I ask you to unmute, because I'm just trying to understand. Our question was what are the important elements or important imperatives for storytelling, and you have given research, data, customer reviews, product ads. Can you elaborate? A very, very interesting insight that you have written.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the insight so far. Sorry, I can't
No worries. Don't be
on
sorry for anything.
terminology with you. Oh,
No
yeah.
issues.
So, my perspective was our stories should be backed up by research and data, because they will give authenticity to our communication while we are communicating anything with our customers. Reviews, because they are direct voice of the customers who have experienced our products or services. So that's why I have chosen customer reviews. And the videos, because they create a lot of impact in any person's mind. So ads or videos will also take an important aspect. And the social, because social listening and social communication is a 21st century, or maybe we can say is the thing currently in trend. So we need to be socially active as a brand, or as a product, or as a storyteller. So that is the reason I have put social.
Wonderful, thank you. And just to build this point, if you read a lot on storytelling, you'll find that marketing, branding, PR uses a lot of storytelling. Sometimes, unfortunately, manipulative. But what Ashish has said is very interesting. If your stories are backed, when I say backed, you sometimes overtly relying on the research and data and not telling the story is a different altogether impact. On the other hand, if your story is there and you given backings of what research and data, it kind of amplifies. I was wondering when he said customer reviews, and I'll tell you why. If you have ever purchased on Amazon or Flipkart or any of those buying things, I don't know how many of you read a review before you ultimately buy, right? Now, if the review just has a stars, which you get a rating, you still will not decide. But on the other hand, if someone has put up a story, okay, story in the sense I purchased, what is a story? Simple. I purchased this 3 months back. It's been working fine. It's been doing well. It didn't break, da 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 da. Or I've been using it for 3 months. Last time it didn't work. So these stories help us make a decision. So everywhere there are stories. We just don't realize, we are reading it. And for sellers in Amazon, if there is no review, the time taken for them to sell their product is much more longer than there are reviews. Even if those are bad, even if some of those bad, still people would say, okay, fine, I'm reading a review, I can live with this, let me go and buy it. Let it come, then I'll return it, if it doesn't. And that's why reviews, that's why it helps. And it's not about only positive reviews, okay? You will see those negative reviews also. People will say bakwas product, don't buy it, expensive, this, etc. I have noticed myself, if there's a story in that bakwas product, I'll read it, and then I'll read the other stories and then make my own decision about whether I want to buy or not. I don't know how many of you, if you have also done similarly, in the reaction, there's a yes button or a no button. Have you similarly purchased from the net by reading the reviews? In spite of having a bad or a good review, you still went ahead and purchased that. How many of us done it? Yeah, I saw thumbs up, but if you put a tick, then I'll get a score also. If in the reaction, if you see that. If you don't see that, no worries. Your thumbs up is good enough. So many of us can be influenced even with a review, which can be positive or negative. That's the story. But if it's just written bad product, generally people don't read it because it's too small and nothing. The moment there's a complete which goes a little below, they will open it and read it. And that's to tell you that stories are not always a hare and a tortoise, starfish or something. Stories could be people's personal lives too, and that also creates major influence and impact. Anyway, we are not here to do any branding work or PR and all that. So let's focus on our business storytelling piece. So let me move forward and offer my three, umbrella words that I would say makes storytelling. So in storytelling, I've realized over this 27 years that I've been training in public speaking, using storytellings and all that, there are three important imperatives. That means critical elements that you need to enhance. So if you want to use stories, then it's not only about the story. The butterfly in the center, and I'll tell you the story of a butterfly in a while. The butterfly in the center is a metaphor for a story. Okay, the story. So story is important, but story itself will not influence. So a good business storyteller, a leader, needs to look at the other two components. So what are the other two components? On the left-hand side is the narrator, the storyteller. If the storyteller is weak, the story is powerful, the story will not land magically. Right? What is on the right hand side? This is called a basket or a potli of stories. I don't know. I mean, I'm putting my neck on the block and saying this. Sometimes I attend sessions of people, different forums, and every forum, the same story goes on. For any topic under the sun, same story, starts with the same story. So I had this very senior lawyer who used to teach in our college, and in our college, he was a great storyteller. I went once. I didn't register myself at the bar, but naturally I was part of the government law college alumni and a member of the board. So I had once been invited for a particular forum where this senior counsel was speaking. I was aghast. The same story which I've been listening for 10 years. He used to come for our college. He used to use the same story somewhere else, same story. Everywhere, if it's the same story, it becomes boring. So that means this guy who had the power to narrate a story, had the story, but kept on using the same story, didn't have a basket of stories. A good leader, a good storyteller needs to have a bucket of stories. Now you may say, hey Ajit, I have attended your session, you are telling the same stories that you have told us. Yes, I do that because I'm talking on storytelling, right? But if you attend different sessions of mine, so if you're attending authentic listening that I do for CART and other companies, the stories are completely different, right? So for every topic, I would pick up a story, fortify it, practice it, create it, then this works. Otherwise, if you have only one story, it's very irritating when people start 1960. Oh, who bothers, yaar? If I start every session of mine in 1970, my kids will say, Dad, stop it. 1970 ho gaya, खत्म हो गया अभी 2000 का कुछ बोलो 2020. So a good storyteller needs to make the stories also new, therefore the bucket or the basket. So please change yours. Other than the classics, if you're using the classics, if you're using a panchatantra, if you're using that, go ahead and use the old stories. However, if you're trying to use regular stories, inspiring stories of people and all that, then you need to start reading and creating a wonderful repertory of stories. If you don't create a library of stories, people are not going to get impressed with the storyteller. So three imperatives. Again, repeating: the story itself, how the story, how you make the story. If it's something which is not just read, so you have to create a story, or create it for narration, or build it up, or design it. The second is the narrator, your ability to narrate the story. And the third is the bucket or the basket or the potli of stories that you need to have, so you can dip into that bucket and remove the right story in the right forum. That makes storytelling very magical. Okay, so let me now show you what I can offer you from first the storytelling basket. I have used a Hindi word here, potli. Potli, Baba ki potli hoti hai, or potli Baba. I don't know whether many of us remember there used to be in Doordarshan, there used to be Potli Baba ki kahani. I used to watch it every day, and amazing. Like Vikram and Betal, every time you read the Chanda Mama, you wait for what happens this time to Vikram Betal and all that, in spite of we knowing that ultimately Betal will run away back to the tree and Vikram will have to climb. King Vikram will have to, Vikram Aditya will have to climb and pick it up. We knew it. However, it was magical to read because every time they came, every month they came with a new twist or a new thing. So, what is your storytelling basket? And as a person, especially if you're still in corporates, then you can use this framework. For people who are not anymore in corporates, then start building up, read more. You will find that most of the stories fall into what I call as a fossil framework. So there's a simple framework that I use, and I'm just going to share this with you. Just give me a moment. Let me move forward on this. So what is the fossil framework or fossil potli? So it is about 6 types of stories, and maybe more, but 6 types. It's intertwined. Some of these stories can fall here as well as there, which is fine, but try to create a potli which has these 6 buckets or 6 elements. So you start putting it, at least have those basic 6, then you can put more. Some of these stories, as I said, will merge here and there, which is okay. So F, the first F stands for what we call as foundational stories or founding stories. So in the organization, always reach out to who founded the story, what was happening when they founded. Like when Kavita introduced me as a founder of International Association of Facilitators in India, um, there was no International Association of Facilitators. They were all trainers, and facilitation is completely different. So there's a story how 3 of us from different parts were brought together. We didn't know each other, and then we said, hey, let's build an association for the community. So it becomes a story. It's founding. So if you're in an organization, you're if it's a industrialist organization, the business, how it got started. So Tatas have a story, the Goenkas have a story. Similarly, entrepreneurs have their own story of how they founded and now have become unicorns. Trace it out, find it out, and use these stories powerfully to communicate to your within the organization. O stands for overcoming barriers. Now you may say founding stories and overcoming. Yeah, there could be a founder who has overcome barriers. Great, that merges. However, find out stories which are very strong about overcoming barriers. There were problems. Government had sanctions, and there was this businessman who worked to resolve it and became successful. That becomes overcoming barriers. So it can be founding stories also. However, it has a very strong element of overcoming barriers that inspires people to, so when people say, oh, COVID and this and that, if you have a story which really talks about the difficulties that were faced, say 40-50 years back, by the founders or someone, and they worked around it and they set up the organization or they created the organization, it becomes overcoming barrier stories. The third one which we have is S, which is success stories. These are very easy to gather. My only suggestion is, please don't get biased to people with high credibility in the organization only. Some of these success stories lie with employees. Sometimes it's very sad that we only pick up stories of owners, industrialists, people who are well known and all that. We don't really harvest stories of someone who was working on the shop floor and did something magical, and that changed the organization. The credit probably was taken by someone else. So reach out, because as a person who's narrating business stories, if people see you reaching out to stories from everywhere, your credibility as a person in the organization specific to vulnerability and humility goes very higher. Otherwise, we can all talk about, for example, if it's a Tata Group, we can all talk about Tata Group, but there are so many amazing stories within the Tatas at lower levels, at mid levels, is also we could harvest. And the magic thing in Tatas is some of the leaders narrate stories of people very, very down. Outsiders, yes, we narrate stories of the leaders out there. But it's good within the organization to find out success stories. And success could be something that was an innovation or a creativity, and that can inspire a lot of things happening. The next S works with your value system of the organization. So self values, how in spite of now you may say, is it a barrier? No, in spite of people wanting you to do things which are against the values of the organization, how certain people stood up, had the courage to stand up, even with the people who are at the senior levels, stood up. Those are amazing stories. So self values or values based stories, very powerful. It is actually inspires people to live the values of the organization. So when we do values work in a company, we generally harvest value stories and then make the managers, leaders start narrating it. And these are live actual stories, because it's so easy to always clap for someone who's been the top sales guy. Very easy. You don't know what he or she has done to become a top sales guy, right? But on the other hand, someone who's not top, but kept the values of the organizations high, and still performed and still kept it, that would be amazing story to harvest. And that's where automatically the values of the organization moves differently once we work with that. I stands for inspiration. Now this can go outside the organization too. So I may be part of this organization, I could pick up inspiring stories of others and use it in the organization. And I find today's entrepreneurs wonderful in that space. Many of the entrepreneurs that I have met and heard, they narrate stories of actually their competitors also at times. But traditional folks still go with, not bringing competition. I think it's fine to, if it's an inspirational story, I may be part of one organization, but if it's an inspirational story from even a competitor, it's inspiring, right? It talks about human values, adherence to rules, regulations, diversity. It can inspire people. So this is where you can even go outside. You could even go to outside leaders, local leaders and all that. Just be careful about political leaders. I would say that gets a little risky, but otherwise there are enough leaders around. The last one, life stories, are about actual well-known people. Okay, so this is where you bring Mahatma Gandhi or Mother Teresa or Lal Bahadur Shastri or Dr. Abdul J. Kalam in reference. So this is where you need to do your homework well, bring about that. So if you've read about Wings of Fire, there are amazing stories there in your talk. Depending on what you're proposing and saying, you could bring that story and align it to the research and data that you are projecting and talking about. So these are the 6 buckets in the portly that you could have, or 6 smaller portlies that you have. If on a regular basis, if you start harvesting stories in each of the bucket, you will never have a problem about not having a story, right? So that's why the 6 buckets. Have these buckets, then in different forums you can pick up which you want and use it. Now you may say, will I remember? Fine, write it down in a diary. I know some very good storytellers, rather leaders, who are using stories. They keep a small pocket book, or they're nowadays putting it on their phone, and just categorize it. By the way, there's stories.com also. There's sites where you could even mark and keep, and then you could, in a forum, you could use a particular story that you just read. But it's not only the story, the other things also will play. So any questions around the fossil portly? So these are 6 buckets that you can use to harvest your stories. So now look at it. If you have 2 stories in each, you have already 12 stories with you. 12 stories can last you for a year, 2 years, and it works well. Next, so keep on updating these buckets, or as we say, sometimes turning the portlies, removing everything from there and having new stories put in. And that's something which as a person who's using business storytelling needs to keep on doing. Okay, so if there are any questions, thoughts, fine. Otherwise, I'll move ahead and get to the next piece that I would like to talk about. Now, you may wonder why I have not told any story, because I've kept my favorite story, and then we are going to look at story crafting as a framework. So here I'm going to give a little importance to me by spotlighting me. I hope you don't mind. As it is, you may be seeing me, but for someone who has a different view, I'm spotlighting and I'm telling my favorite story, which I tell for my storytelling sessions. This is about a story of a child in a village, a very smart child in a village. What happens is this child catches a butterfly in his hands. He's with his friend who, suddenly looks at him and wonders why he's caught a butterfly. He says, "Butterfly, why?" He says, "Today I have a plan." He says, "Why? What's the plan?" He says, "Today I am going to teach the wise old man in the village, Dadu, wise old man in the village, that I am smarter than him." These are kids, right? Kids always, probably there's some bit of jealousy about everyone going for advice to the wise old man. And this child catches a butterfly and says, "Today I'm going to teach this wise old man that a lesson, kind of, I am better than him." So the friend says, "So what's the plan?" He says, I'm going to go to the wise old man and ask him whether this butterfly is dead or alive." So what if the wise old man says that the butterfly is dead? I'm going to open my hands and the butterfly is going to fly away. Okay. And what if the wise old man says that the butterfly is alive? It's going to be dead. I win, he loses. So with this plan in the mind, both the kids go to the village chowra. It's kind of afternoon. Wise old man with the panchas probably had a discussion. They were kind of in that mood of, settling off. A little afternoon can be a little drowsy also, right? So when these kids come with a pace, with something in the hand, the wise old man opens his eyes a little and sees that, oh, beware. And he's the smarter kid in the village, knows that. So he says, "Beware. Wise old man, wise old man." "Yes, my dear child." "Wise old man, I have a question for you. Will you be able to answer?" "My dear child, go ahead, let me see if I can answer." "Wise old man, I have a butterfly in my hands. Is it dead or alive?" The wise old man looks into the eyes of the child. The wise old man looks into the eyes of the child and says, "My dear child, whether the butterfly is dead or alive is in your hands." I repeat, my dear child, whether the butterfly is dead or alive is in your hands. Let me, let me tell you of an instance. I can't name the organization. There's long time back, about 12, 13 years back, I was in Mumbai. Now I stay in Pune. There's this colonel who headed the HR of a pharmaceutical company. One of my students from Wellinger had referred my name for a leadership program, and they had about 200 managers to be trained or something like that. So the first time I went, met the colonel, he told me, "This is what we want," all that, and we gave a proposal. Then when I called up after 15 days, he again told me, "Oh, can you change this? Can you do that?" I again revised the proposal, sent it. So every time I was calling in 15 days, revising, sending, revising, sending, revising, sending, but nothing was nothing was happening. So I think it was 3 months later. One day I called up my student and said, "Hey, what's this here? Colonel seems to be just doing time pass. Keeps on calling me to the office, revise proposal and all that." He says, "You speak to the colonel. We are now kind of finalizing, so please speak to the colonel." So I gave a call to the colonel and I said, "So can I, I was wondering what has happened to my proposal. I had sent it to you." He said, "Oh, Ajit, I know that. Why are you free next week?" I said, "Yeah." So he said, "Why don't you come and give us a presentation to my whole team?" I said, "Okay." So next week, I was all ready for my presentation, confirmation, everything. And I started. Naturally, I have a deck and I was talking and I used this, I was talking about what we do, how do we train and all that. Suddenly what happened was they had ordered for tea and biscuits. uh, around 4 o'clock was my meeting. These guys come serving, and unfortunately these guys were not trained, so they were making a lot of noise. So I paused. So the colonel said, Ajit, continue, no worries. I said, sir, let me have also some tea. He said, okay, fine. So I actually was not really waiting for the tea. I was waiting for the tea to be served and the biscuits to be served so they can concentrate on what I'm saying. Because it's when people are eating and drinking, many a times they're not listening because these guys are coming in between and serving, right? So while this was going on, this colonel looks at me and says, Ajit, as a friend, tell me, this training all, is it really helpful? Does it really change people? Now, this was what we call as a googly of a question, right? Head HR asking a question whether this is helpful or not. I've spent 3 months revising proposals, sending all the proposals to you, and I wonder what. Luckily, I had this story in my potli. I said, sir, can I tell you a story? He says, story? I'm asking you a question. So maybe that has an answer. He says, go ahead. Probably, He's like, okay, fine. ठीक है. I told the story of the butterfly. And then I said, whether the butterfly is dead or alive, sir, is in your hands. And just kept quiet. The magic of the story was, he said, sorry, Ajit, wrong question. Let's move ahead. What was going on in my mind? In my mind was, if it was not important, then why would I have been in this field? I would have been in my dad's business. Come on, you're asking a question and your whole team is here and you're asking a question as a friend. What was the intention? But on the other hand, if I had answered in any way, believe me, I would have been thrown out from there. I told the story. We managed to get the work. We even trained people. But the story was an answer to his question. Sometimes when people ask, even in board meetings, some funny questions, a story answers and they get the right message. So just sharing this with you, I have loved this story because I have used it in places where people ask me, does training really help? Is it really good? Now, let me pause. So if you see, I told you 2 stories. One was the butterfly story, and then the second story about how I use the butterfly story in an actual environment, which is a story by itself. You can even add in 2 stories, merge it and use it. Like in this forum, I have used 2 stories as part of one story. So, ages back we had a TV which was called Picture in a Picture. So this becomes Picture in a Picture, story in a story. So that's what can be used, and it really has a if you use it in the right way. So here we are. I have talked about 2 things up till now. One is the fossil framework, and we told you a story of the butterfly. But let me now introduce the magical framework, or I would say a model that really helps build a story. Now, when you have an existing story, you can also put it in this framework. If you don't have an existing story, and you have a story that you see in your environment, you can put it in this framework. Now, there are many different frameworks available. Okay, you read a book, you will get what is called a story spine, and people use different. This is the framework that we use. We have created it kind of proprietary to us, but we share it. And just to tell you that when you create a story, look at that there are these 5 things that you're covering whenever you're telling a story. So let me share how this works. So if you see in any story, and you'll find that every story will have these elements. So the first thing that you need to look at is what we call as character or characters. So when you're doing story crafting, who are your characters? So if you see in the butterfly story, the kid, his friend, the wise old man, and the butterfly. These are 4 characters. The butterfly doesn't have an actual characterization, but the butterfly is just a metaphorical, or probably it's a catalyst to the whole story. But the characters, primary characters, are the wise old man and the child. On the other hand, if you look at the story about the colonel, his team, but colonel and me and the story, right? So what is the character? The second part, which is very important in your story, is creating the scenario. If people don't get the scenario, they don't get an imaginary. So you need to give them the imaginary. Now, this can be reversed also. Sometimes we tell stories with the scenario first. Like if you're telling the thirsty crow story, you would say there was it was parched, it was very hot, and there was no natural resource of water, and there was a bird, there was a crow flying in search of water. It's very thirsty, right? If you don't give the scenario, people will not know why is the crow not going and drinking from a river or a pond or something else. So you need to create the scenario. So at times you create the scenario first and then the character, or the character first and then the scenario. So you can choose. It's interchangeable. The third important element in story crafting is a conflict or a problem. You need to bring a conflict or a problem. If there's no conflict or a problem, there's no story, there's no impact. The story is just a normal story. It doesn't create any change, nothing happens. Why a conflict or a problem? Because people like to know what happened with this conflict, what happened with this problem that came. So the fourth thing which many people miss out is kahani mein twist. If there is a twist, the higher the twist in your story, the more the story lands powerfully. So what's the twist? So in a clever crow story, if you see, the thirsty crow in search of water sits on the pot, looks around, can't reach the water because it's very low. He looks around and sees pebbles. Now we could have seen many other things. Looks at the pebble, picks up a pebble, puts it one by one. The pebbles, go down, water comes up, quenches thirst, and flies away, right? So what is the problem? Problem is thirst. What is the twist? Twist is when you didn't even think about it, the story writer or the narrator brought in pebbles. Did we ever think that pebbles would be used? So the twist is very important. The higher and the more powerful the twist. It's like you. By the way, you can use this storytelling framework also, my dear friends, to to create a movie. Okay. The last bit, which is very important, is resolution. I call it resolution. You may call it a solution. Resolution is always you may not have a clear solution. So character, scenarios, conflict, problem, twist, and what's the resolution? What was the resolution? So in my story with the Colonel, what was the resolution? In the story of the butterfly, what was the resolution? And the resolution brings people to saying, okay, if I do this, this is what can happen. So if you're building change, if you're building impact, if you're building actionables, then the resolution needs to have a kind of a way. I would say, there could be even still alternatives, but there's a way for people to move forward. And that is what you need to approach. Now, some storytellers, if it's their own story, the resolution could be facilitated. I could tell you a story till the conflict. I could check up with you, then I could do something and then bring in the twist. And then so players, storytellers can play around. So as facilitators, at times I just bring the story till the conflict and the problem, facilitate, and then bring the twist of my story and then the resolution. And it works very well if it's a facilitated session. If it's a narration session, then we will bring the story to its logical resolution that's there. So this is a story crafting framework which I offer to you. As any story you take, even if you're taking a story of someone, a child in your society, and you feel it's a very inspiring story, what's the character? Is there a name? Is there? Now, there's only a little bit of I would say you'll have to, it's like a painting. You'll have to take a brush and paint it well. So if I'm using a story in south of India, I would see that the names of the characters have more of south. If I use a John and a Jill and a Jack and all that, people become distant. So bring in the regular characters around. So if I'm doing it in Maharashtra, I will, what I do is I travel by the cab, and I will talk to the cab driver, and whatever the cab driver's name, I'll pick up that name. Because for people, it's not exactly whether that person, so you're bringing context, you're making it live. So if you're going and narrating it to a global audience, then see that the names are globally fine. If you give an Indian name, which is a tongue twister, then that sometimes doesn't, other than if it's a life story, inspiring story, or a factual story. Factual stories, you'll have to have the names of the people. On the other hand, I said, if you are, creating a story out of what you heard or what you experienced, then this is what you can do. So this is how we work with the story craft. Looking at time, I'll move forward. Now comes the last bit where we say the storyteller. The storyteller becomes also important. So remember, we said 3 imperatives. One is the story. So I gave you a story craft for that. The second, I said the basket, which is the fossil potli of a basket. The most important of all is the teller or the narrator or the storyteller or the sutradhar, whatever you call. And it takes practice. It takes public speaking skills. But I'm just giving you some pointers that can help you work with it if you're focusing on the narrator. Now, the narrator creates the magic. So I may have a great story. I may have amazing number of stories, but if I don't narrate it well, the story will go what we call as flat, absolutely flat. No one gets inspired. Nothing happens. They'll say, theek hai. So you have to use your skills of the oratory, use the skills of the narrative, use the skills of a public speaker. And that's why sometimes I believe that some of the politicians, when they narrate stories, it comes out so well, because what they do is they already have that gift of speaking. When you look at corporates, many of the managers, leaders don't have the gift of the gab, as we call it, or the gift of speaking, because they have always spoken to the brain, not to the heart. And therefore, we coach them on what I have something called a power formula. But anyway, we are not doing that today. So just to tell you that the storyteller should use the power of the narrative to create this magic wherein the listener starts feeling, whose story is it? And there are some answers to it. So the listener starts feeling, is it someone else's story? Is it the narrator's story? Is this Ajit's story? In the sense, is Ajit the character? Is it someone else's story? If you look at the next part, it says, is it both our stories? But the most powerful will be if you can come down here, when you can make them realize that it is actually their story that you are narrating. That means the listener says, ye yaar, meri kahani hai. This is my life. He knows it. This is my life. And that's the power of the narrative. If you can bring the person, the listener, each of the listener inside your story, and they become the character, I'll tell you, stories become very powerful. Everyone will not move inside your story for sure, but if you can move maximum people inside the story. So if I'm talking about the two children, the more you start seeing yourself as the child or yourself as the wise old man, my story will land much more powerful, right? If you see it as a story being said, it is impactful, but it is not very powerful. So powerful, and we talk about power. I don't have a slide support to it. What are the 5 things I say that a narrator should work on? P stands for posture and gestures, right? POWR, P stands for posture and gestures. O is the oratory skill, the oration, your voice play, the modulation. So voice has 5 elements. You need to work with the voice. And if your voice has a play, using the pauses, the pace, the tone and the pitch. So all these things makes a voice. So one is posture and gestures, your hand movements. Now, if you stand like this and narrate a story, the story doesn't land. I've seen some amazing leaders standing, and this podium is the biggest problem. Sometimes I would say sorry, but even in BMA, they should kill the podium. The podium restricts hand movements, and hands are life. A good storyteller uses hands very effectively, whether virtual or whether face to face, right? So P stands for posture and gestures. O is oratory skill. W is the craft within the craft. So you have a character and all those things. You're just not saying there was once a person and all that. Then the story doesn't land. E stands for eye contact. Eyes are life. Eyes need to connect. So eye contact. How is your eye contact? In virtual, you have to look into the camera at certain points of time, not look at people here and there. R stands for response and reaction. How are people responding? Even I know in virtual it becomes a little difficult. We have 4 or 5 videos on, but I'm looking at Roshni, I'm looking at Kavita. You know what I'm saying? Roshni is giving me great, amazing feedback, which helps me know, okay, this is landing well. In live sessions, the advantage is you have a little more people out there, and you can narrate the story. It becomes very powerful. So this becomes the POWR, which generally is a public speaking framework we use. So that becomes the narrator's magic, right? Okay, we have 2 minutes. So let me come to a closure by saying that I have something up for you as a gift. So we talked about all these 3 imperatives, but then while we are come to a close with an ode. So I want to give an ode to very short stories that requires no storycraft, that requires no narrator, that is just words. And if you have 2 minutes to spare or probably 3 minutes, I would invite you to read this 10 stories. Just give me a second. Let me put it up again. I would invite you to read these stories, which I'm not going to speak. There's just going to be music played, and you're going to, just read and reflect. Very short stories, and think about it. Are these stories very powerful? Okay. These were 10 stories for you. With this, thank you. I know there was one or two questions out there. W Anjana stands for With the Story Craft. And I just wanted to offer this 10 stories, which requires no narration, nothing that I talked about, but still can be very powerful influencers on its own. So with this, thank you, BMA, for inviting me. It was a pleasure. Over to Kavita.
Thank you. These 10 stories are very, very touching, and they are just two small sentences, and you have made us very emotional at the end. The whole purpose of having your session on the last few days of 2021, I think is going to give us very different energy to enter into 2022. Thank you, Ajit, for being with us today, and all my colleagues who are here today. Indrapalji, the former president, I think Jagmohanji is there, Indranil, and thank you all for being here. Storytelling can be so interesting, and it can give learnings of life and learnings for your career. Ajit has made it very different, and the 10 stories that he has told today at the end, just 2 sentences, but they were very, very emotional and touchy. To end this year on 31st of December, we have for you a musical evening. My colleague from University of Mumbai, Dr. Nagdive, will be performing for us on that day. And he has been performing the songs of Mohammad Rafi and Jagjit Singh. He has requested that if you have any farmaish for him, he will try and oblige. So do send us your farmaish. We'll start as usual at 6 o'clock with the musical evening. And please don't forget to also subscribe Bombay Management Association's YouTube channel. You are aware we have more than 200 very interesting sessions that we have conducted online and otherwise also. Visit Bombay Management Association's YouTube channel, subscribe it, see the videos. This session will also be on YouTube in some time. Do join us on every Wednesday and Friday for Wednesday Wisdom Webinar and Friday Fundamentals, where we together think about leadership, management, and many other things. Have a nice evening today. Looking forward to see you in the musical evening, where Dr. Nagdive will be presenting to us some songs of Mohammad Rafi and Jagjit Singh. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye all. Pleasure to be here.